Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edna Karanja. I am a senior program coordinator at ANDE. That's the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs based here in Nairobi, Kenya. And happy to be here today. And I'm super excited to have you join us for this session. So for those who have not interacted with ANDE before, so ANDE is the global network of organizations, and we work to support entrepreneurship in emerging markets. We work to support entrepreneurship in emerging markets. And today we will be talking about impact measurement and management. And over the past couple of years, we have been working together with Emory University to collect data on the state of accelerators in around the globe. And today's session will focus on building capacity using impact measurement and management. And we hope that you will find this session very useful and learn quite a bit of impact measurement and management. Over to you, Mallory.
Thank you so much, Edna. Hi, everybody. So my name is Mallory St. Clair. I'm the impact analyst for ANDE. And as part of ANDE's mission, we always seek to disseminate best practices around impact measurement and management, or IMM, and help the organizations we work with build their capacity around this. So that being said, this session is kind of serving as a little taster preview of a more comprehensive training workshop series that we're offering at the end of April, which is specifically targeted towards accelerators and is going to go very much in depth to how to set up and improve your IMM systems and how to deepen your understanding of IMM. So keep that in mind, and if you like this session, we're going to give some more information about that more comprehensive training course at the end of our time together. Yeah, that being said, I will stop talking and I will kick it over to Adam Richards.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to my colleagues from ANDE. I know you're in the sort of final stages of the conference. We've been told it's the sort of last 100-meter dash. So we hope we can make it as entertaining as it needs to be at this stage in the event. So I work with Social Value International, and we're an international charity that wants to change the way the world and society account for value. And my first promise to you is it is far more exciting than it sounds, because we genuinely believe that by empowering people to help us make better decisions, we can improve people's well-being, we can increase levels of equality, and we can reduce environmental harm and destruction that is caused by our activities. So we have networks all around the world. Have a look at us at a later date, and please reach out at any time. As Mallory said, this is a bit of a taster. I intend to make this as interactive as possible, and we've got a really nice group, a nice number of people with us today. So we're going to go through a few interactive activities, the usual sort of stuff around, who's in the room. I'm going to ask you to use Mentimeter very shortly. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. I'm going to ask you to use the whiteboard feature pretty soon, and hopefully you're up for playing a bit of a role play and thinking about what sort of impact questions we need to ask, having gone into that idea around what impact really means and wanting to highlight what is a really exciting time at the moment in this impact world, because there's a real consensus about what we mean, how to get there, the purpose of it. We definitely don't have all of the answers. I'm very honest and transparent and hold my hands up. But there's been some great advancements in quite recent years and some really positive movements. And we hope to be able to share those with you. And then asking you a range of questions. And please do use the chat, the usual stuff. Throw any questions in, raise your hand at any point. And I want to make this really interactive, quite informal if we can. I definitely don't want to be giving a sort of talk and chalk lecture. I am a fully recovered academic. That was a long time ago now. So the first thing is to ask you a couple of Menti questions. And you can see the code there. So please go to menti.com, enter that code. If perhaps somebody could throw it into the chat as well, people can copy and paste that. If you could, please, Mallory, that'd be amazing. So the first question, which I'll open up very shortly, says, well, how confident do you feel for your practice with the organization you work with or the organizations that you support? how confident do you feel to effectively manage the impacts of your activities right now? So the code there, 7345523. See you there shortly.
Yeah, I think that people are answering the first question and then you have to move.
Fantastic. So thank you, guys. Thank you for coping with my absolute fear. As soon as anything technological goes wrong, and it's usually me at fault, I sort of panic. So what I'm seeing in front of us is a split. And one thing I want to say is that, you know, let's recognize that we are all on a journey when it comes to impact management. It's a phrase I often use because nobody is at the beginning. I think the person who is very brave there saying not confident at all, I would like to think that you might be more confident than you think, perhaps. And maybe those who are unsure and maybe quite confident, perhaps you're a bit more confident. And hopefully by the end of this session, and certainly by the end of the full session, I would hope to be able to increase people's confidence, because you will be doing some of this already. So my next question is to ask you what impact management means to you. What does it mean to you? So I can see people are already contributing, which is great. So what words describe impact management for you? Again, I think there's some fantastic integrity in this room. I can see people saying difficult. People talking about reporting, and oh my goodness, there's one of my favorite words at the moment, verifiable. We might come back to that word, verifiable, because I think that really does demonstrate a great level of, again, integrity. Time consuming, I like this. I have a very honest room with me. So lots of different ideas as to what impact management means. And this idea of, you know, reporting and data and understanding a job, underfunded, absolutely. I could not agree more. This is going to keep changing in front of me, I'm sure. But what I think it's fair to say is that impact management often means different things to different people. And Katuti, thank you for taking a photo of that. It'd be great if you could share it with me. Looking at reporting numbers, data, 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 more data. That's the first time I've ever seen anybody say that. Reporting and measurement, being strategic. I very much like the fact that words are appearing, such as learning and understanding contribution. And yes, there's the communication piece, but what I want to do in a moment when I'm brave enough to leave Menti and go back into the PowerPoint is really try and unpick what impact management, impact measurement means, what this growing consensus around these ideas is indicating to us. So here we go, my fingers are firmly crossed. Thank you to everybody for joining in with that. So we have an idea of what impact management means to different people. But before we get into what the words mean, I think we should always take that step back and ask ourselves what the purpose is. You know, why do we talk about impact management and not impact measurement? It's not just about measuring. It's not just about communicating either. It's about using data. Somebody said it's data, data, and more data. Well, I hope to be able to dispel that myth a little bit. It's not all about data. It's all about decision making. It's about using evidence that we have, that you probably are collecting some of already, to improve people's lives, to not only increase those positive effects that you have on people's lives, but also look to reduce some of those unintended negatives. Now, that immediately is perhaps to some people something that we're not familiar with thinking about, that we need to not just manage positive effects, but we also need to manage the negative effects as well. So for us at Social Value, it's about maximizing. It's not even about management. We can all measure. We all have an impact, and we can all have a greater impact. So if we manage and we make more of our resources, we're doing something better. But I want us all to have this ambition, this philosophy, this way of thinking that goes, I want to maximize impacts, because to maximize is to make people's lives as positive as possible, to reduce, if not eliminate, those negatives. And how we do that is about thinking about, well, we are making decisions anyway. We're making decisions probably with very little or limited data, and more data. I want us to think about how to reduce the risk that the decisions we take are not the best, that they are the suboptimal or the wrong decisions. And I want us to increase our level of accountability. And we'll talk about who we're accountable to very shortly, because I think that's really important. Because this is what the consensus is about. We're talking about outcomes. We're talking about effects on people. We're talking about going beyond just our goals. Again, that intended as well as unintended. We need to understand the consequences of our activities, the results, the effects. I worry the world I sort of live in, and I'm sure many of you do, this impact world, is so full of jargon, impact, outcomes. It's really, really fuzzy. And I think it's really important that we unpick what we're talking about. So we're talking about effects on people, and we're talking about how much of those effects that we can contribute to, and using the evidence about that to drive improvements in our performance. So I'm going to stop in a moment. I'm going to take another risk, and I'm going to ask you to use the whiteboard facility or feature. And I want you to tell me what questions we should ask of any project, of any investment, of any activity. And we're going to take a social enterprise perspective. And what I want you to do is think about the questions that you would ask from the perspective of that particular stakeholder, in order to, yes, measure the effects, the impacts of those activities, but also think about what questions you would need to ask to be able to manage them as well, ultimately to maximize them, to make those choices between project A and project B, to deliver project A this way or this way. So the task we're going to give you, and we're going to give you about up to 10 minutes, is to think about different roles, different perspectives. And we're going to use this generic case study in front of us. So I'll show you the whiteboard very shortly, but here it is, employability. It's a social enterprise, and it's convinced it does good things. It's convinced it makes positive impacts in the lives of people. Now, it has some investment. The investor wants a financial return and some social impact. The program supports job seekers, supports long-term unemployed people to give them the practical and the pastoral skills to find work, one would hope. But what questions do we need to ask of employability to understand the effects, those impacts that change for people, but also how to manage them as well? Now, we're going to take 4 different perspectives, and I'm going to edit the whiteboard in a moment when we get in. But I want you to go around the whiteboard and think about, what would you ask if you were an investor? What question would you ask if you were the board, a member of the board of employability? What question would you ask if you were a manager of employability? And in fact, instead of investor, let's say accelerator, you are supporting employability. What questions would you ask in order to understand the effects, but also manage them? But I also want you to think importantly from the beneficiary perspective, the service user perspective. What questions would you ask if you were a long-term unemployed person before you joined the project? What sort of questions would you ask? So genuinely, if there's any questions about this task now, because we're going to spend about 10 minutes on it, please do shout now. Please do put any questions into the chat or shout out loud while I go into sort the whiteboard out. Any questions coming in, Mallory, at the moment?
I'm not seeing anything. So for those of you who have never done this before, you can actually write on Adam's whiteboard. If you go up to view options, which should be at the top of your screen, and you click on annotate, you will get a options bar to type on the screen, to draw on the screen, to stamp on the screen. And so if you click the text option, then you can put in the questions that Adam was asking into these 4 categories. So please let us know if you cannot do that or you can find it.
And you can see this at the moment, Mallory, the
Yes.
whiteboard.
Mhm.
Cool. Good. My panic's starting to calm down a little bit now, which is really good. So again, yeah, think about these different perspectives. If you were an investor, what questions would you want to ask in order to understand the impacts? The same for the employability, the social enterprise board, the same for the managers, but also think about what questions you would ask as a service user and for the service user before you join the program. What would you want to know about employability? So we're going to give you, as I say, a few moments, go around that board a couple of times, throw some questions on there, and I will happily give some prompts. And again, if there's any clarification questions, just shout out loud, please, guys. I'm just going to give a little prompt as well, particularly for the investors at the moment, because don't forget, yes, I can see the questions around the profitability of the business, the social enterprise, and of course, there was that demand for a particular % return. But this is a social enterprise. I would hope they would also be investing for impact as well. So what sort of questions would you want to ask to understand the social as well as the financial impact? Some interesting questions appearing for the managers at the moment. You know, is the strategy working? I very much like that. Do program participants perceive value? Are we reaching the right people? Really interesting that we're thinking about the perspective of our stakeholders. And the long-term unemployed people. How do I benefit? Well, yes, of course, and you want to know about the cost of the service, but would you not want to know any other questions? Imagine I was saying to you right now, come onto my program, it's employability, I'll help you get a job. How much does it cost? I think you'd ask other questions as well. So what might you ask? Okay, we'll just give you a couple more minutes. And again, I want to just point towards the social enterprise board, the board of employability. Again, just maybe think about it from the perspective of what questions would you ask about financial performance, and then substitute the word financial for social in many cases. Thank you. This is one of those tasks which is quite difficult to do without some time to speak to one another. You know, this is far more effective when you're in a room with people and you can bounce off one another. So this is, you know, it's fantastic that you've had a go at this. And what we're seeing is a range of questions, but there is some consistency here. There are questions for everyone, the different groups around the sustainability. There are questions about the type of job as well. Now, the service user is saying, how do I benefit? Now, of course, we could unpick that question. And I think personally, if it was me, I would be asking, well, what kind of job is it? What are the working conditions? How much will I get paid? How long is the job likely to last? And so on. Maybe I would even ask whether I could go on a better program, maybe thinking that there's an alternative, if of course I have the power to do so. The managers are really asking about are we reaching the right people? Now, I think the board members should also be asking those questions. You know, are we meeting our purpose? Are we meeting what I would hope we would think about, our impact goals? So again, often when we think about social impacts, we should think about, well, what questions as an organizational manager, as a board member, as an investor, what sort of questions would you ask? Now, we have questions about financial targets. Are we meeting our financial targets? I want us to start thinking about social impact targets. How much impact is good enough? And this is what impact management, again, is driving us towards, is changing the way we think about impact. So we don't just say we want to measure, we want some amount of impact. We want as much impact as possible. But to drive that sort of approach, to drive that sort of mindset, we need to be accountable. And we can only be accountable with some targets. So again, in our time together, in our full program spread over 4 sessions, we really drill down into the need and the way to establish what we would call impact targets and how they can hold us to account. And by account, again, what we're talking about is maximizing the benefits and reducing, if not eliminating, any of the negative effects that our stakeholders feel, and in this case, or experience, and in this case, our primary stakeholders, our direct beneficiaries, are long-term unemployed people. But our managers are also asking a great question. Who else? What about those ripple effects? And again, I think that's a fantastic way to think about impact. You know, you have the pond, you drop the stone in, and there are a number of different ripples. There are a number of different effects on a number of different stakeholders. And again, an effective impact management strategy or approach will understand which of those ripples we need to measure and which we need to manage, because we don't need to measure everything. I think that's one thing to make clear. We really do not need to measure everything for everybody, because otherwise we're just going to spend all of our time measuring, and it really is about making improvements. So once again, thank you ever so much. Now, let me show you again a bit of growing consensus around what impact management is talking about. And it's very much talking around a set of impact questions. A set of impact questions that, again, there is this growing global consensus as to what we're talking about. The fact that we are talking about stakeholders. We talk about who experiences changes and what those changes are, those outcomes. In this case, the 4th question down. So we have a range of impact questions that are qualitative in nature. Then we have a range of impact questions that are quantitative. So once we identified what outcomes are, and that, if you think about your stakeholders, you are asking about the jobs, the ripple effects. Those are the outcomes that are experienced by people. What we didn't get into, we didn't identify questions around, well, how many people get a job? How many people get a job that they are satisfied with? And what about all of those other unintended outcomes, be they positive or negative? So there's a range of potential outcomes that we do not know anything about. And that's what impact management allows us to do. It allows us to measure those different changes so that we can manage them again. I know I keep saying the same things, but this is really the purpose of it all. So we want to understand how long the changes last, how sustainable they are. And we want to know how important they are. And I think somebody did have a question there that asked about the value. So we need to understand how important the changes are, but think about your own perspective as accelerators, as organizations that provide support, both financial and non-financial support to organizations. You want to know how much you're contributing as well. So how much of the change, how much of the changes that have been created are caused by your activities? So these are the impact questions, and these are generic. They can be applied to any activity, to any accelerator program, to any enterprise and to any investment. But what I don't want to say is that it's, remember what somebody said, data, data, and more data? Absolutely not. There's a cheesy phrase that I use a lot, and it's enough precision for the decision. It's not about lots and lots of data. It's about enough data or enough evidence to support your decisions. Now, your decision could be a relatively small decision. It could be a operational level decision. When I'm thinking about my own, it could be, do I use Mentimeter in the future? Now, I've got some data now that tells me don't do that ever again. Now, I don't need much rigor to make that decision. After this call, I'll speak with Mallory, Matthew, Edna, and everybody else, and they will tell me, never touch Mentimeter again with your internet connection. And I will say, That gives me enough precision to make a decision. Now, I hope this phrase sticks in the mind because it really does ring true. Because if you want to change government policy, if you want to influence the health agenda of a country, you still have the same impact questions, but the level of precision, the accuracy, the sample size that you need is far greater than the silly example I've just provided. But it gives you that idea about proportionality. And importantly, who answers those questions? Who can tell us about experiences in people's lives? Who can tell us what has changed, how much has changed, how important those changes are, and so on? Well, it's the people who are affected. It's the people supported by entrepreneurs. It's your enterprises supported by yourselves. They can give us data, and more data. In fact, they can give us enough data to support our decision making. It does not have to be scientifically rigorous. Good enough is good enough. So that's one of the big myths of impact management, that we have to get third party in every time, that it has to be scientifically rigorous. It absolutely does not. So impact questions, we frame them by a set of suitable principles, and again, involving stakeholders is central to that. Now, so what? This is why we need to use this evidence. So I'm going to, Mallory and I are going to take another risk right now. I'm going to ask you to make some decisions. I'm going to give you some data, and I want you to make a decision. And your decision is to support Project A or Project B. There is no Project C. So I really do want you to make a decision. Now, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to give you a piece of data, and I'm going to say, please raise your hand, and you can use the reactions or literally raise your hand if you want to support Project A. I'll then assume that everybody else wants to support Project B. But I do want to have a conversation about this. I want people at the end, when I've shown you a range of different data points, to ask questions. I want to know why somebody supported Project A or B and what their rationale was. So Mallory, I'm going to ask you at this moment as well to help me, because I can't see everybody. So if you could sort of give me a bit of an overview that goes, most people are in support of one or the other, that would be really cool. So 2 projects, they both cost the same amount of money, and they are both supporting people towards employment, just like our example, employability. Now, Project A has supported 30 people into employment, and Project B has supported 10 people into employment. So we have some data, we have some output data. We can summarize our activities in numbers. We've supported this many people. So who would support Project A at this point? Who would invest in Project A? Who would invest? Yeah, in fact, who would invest in Project A based on this data? Katuchi.
Okay, so this is Katuchi. If you could just explain to people how they can select the emotion piece, or if not, people should feel free to write whether they want to use to support Project A or B on the chat.
Sure thing. Thank you, Katuchi. So if you go to the bottom ribbon, I think you will be able to see reactions. It's slightly different from me as a presenter, but you can see different reactions. So we can have a thumbs up, as it says there, or a raise of hands in support of one of the different options. So we'll go thumbs up or raise hand for Project A. Let's use a different reaction for Project B. Let's go with a heart, perhaps, if you've got that option. So thank you, Katuchi. Really, really appreciate that. So again, just that option, throw something in the air if you want to support Project A. I can see quite a few people doing it at the moment. Not everybody. There's quite
And we have a couple of Project A's on the chat box, about 5.
Cool, thank you. So we have a bit of consensus, I think. There's probably still a few people, I think, wishing there was Project C, it seems, but there we go. So we have some data. It's often the level of data that we have, quite easy to measure, the number of people in a job. Now, you can, on the reactions, lower your hand using the same button. So if you want to lower your hand, I'm going to ask you the same question. I'm going to ask you this question a number of times. I'm going to give you some more information though. And here's some information, and it's impact question 3. Remember that question about stakeholders. So who experiences the changes, the outcomes? So project A supports 30 people into employment, and they were previously short-term unemployed, whereas project B supported 10 people into employment, whereas they were previously long-term unemployed. So here is that moment again, that question where you can respond in whichever way you prefer. Hands up, some sort of reaction, chat or otherwise for project A. Gloria, you ask a really important question. Gloria, do you want to ask that question out loud? Are you happy to do so? If not, I'm happy to read it. I mean, you ask a great question. And your question is, how do we clarify that a job is satisfactory? Now, I like this, George, as well. You're throwing some curveballs out. So still project A, but there are some variables there. So people are starting to say, well, the data is not quite good enough, perhaps. And what we're saying here is, I think what Gloria and George are saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that there is a significant risk that you make the wrong decision based on this evidence. George, are you willing to say what you're thinking?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, I mean, as much as you could have 30 people employed, and these people were employed short term before. I think, yeah, just like Gloria was saying, it really depends on what job it is and maybe how many follow-on people they're able to support with this new employment that they've received. I think that for me would be a variable I would be willing to consider.
Thank you so much, George, because again, what you're telling me here is you just don't have enough evidence to make a decision. And then when we talk about social impacts, I mean, my experience is more often than not, people don't have good data, good evidence. We're not asking the right questions to the right people. And the right people, the correct people in this case, are those unemployed people. Gloria, you said it, you know, how do we know these jobs are satisfactory? Well, we should be asking those people. We should be respecting the voice of those stakeholders. But too often, 30 people employed, that's 3 times better than 10 people employed, and a decision will be taken to go with project A, which may or may not be the right decision. So we need to try and provide more data. So to Gloria's point, perhaps, and others, is this a satisfactory job? Well, here's some evidence. Project A provides no security over the number of hours of contract or employment per week, a 0 hours contract. I hope this is not a familiar concept. It's something my friends and family are very familiar with in the UK. So my brother-in-law has a 0 hours contract. It means he's got a job, but has no guaranteed hours per week. Therefore, he has no guaranteed income per week. Project B, however, again, those 10 people who were previously long-term unemployed have a guaranteed contract of 35 hours per week. So I will again ask that question, but this time I'm going to say, raise your hand if you wish to support Project B. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer.
I think maybe 5 people.
Cool, thank you. Has anybody changed their mind? Has anybody had that moment of change from initially Project A to Project B, or vice versa? Seeing a few nods and people perhaps acknowledging that they're changing their position. So my point here is to say, well, imagine if we had made that decision initially to go for Project A, but now you're perhaps changing your mind with some more evidence. Now, I'm going to give you 2 pieces of information at the moment, and one is about the salary. Now, the salary, it's above a living wage threshold. One, as you can see, is higher than the other. But I'm also going to give you the answer to impact question 7 around the sustainability of those jobs. Now, those people working in Project B or got the job as a result of Project B, 70% are still in work after 1 year, whereas Project B has a sustainability rate of 40%. George, do you mind me turning to you and asking you your thoughts now with this level of information you have in front of you?
Not a problem, Adam. Thank you for.
I'm glad you're willing to play. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So when you presented question 4, I then thought, so maybe salaries probably a variable there that we haven't seen and we would need to consider. But now that I do have all, or maybe close to all the facts in front of me, then I would be leaning more towards Project B, just because it seems like those people will be employed for longer and something is definitely better than nothing.
Okay, thank you. George, stay on the line. I'm going to give you another piece of information. Please, somebody else though as well, do help George out. I feel very mean. We're talking about value. So I want to give you another piece of information. And this information, again, I want us to be reassured at the moment that it is good enough. All of this is coming from our stakeholders. The evidence is reliable enough. It's from our stakeholders. Now, we've asked them how valuable or how important this job is. So it's not about the salary. It's about how, it's Gloria's question, I think. You know, is it satisfactory? Well, they can tell us, I can tell you how valuable my job or my job is not, perhaps. So Project A, what they are telling us, they have said, look, on average, it's worth 3 out of 10, whereas Project B is worth 6 out of 10. So this is not a monetary value, it's a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is most important. How are you feeling, George?
Definitely on B now. Totally changed from A. Yeah.
Oh, so you did change from A?
Yes, I initially looking at the numbers, more people employed did appeal to me in the initial stages, but now it looks like, you know, job satisfaction, the security of actually having a job despite lower pay, and, you know, security of actually having some hours in the week where you're working. Now that is definitely looking like the right answer, or the preferred answer, if I can say that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would say I agree with you. I don't think there's a right answer yet necessarily. Gloria, again, you don't feel obliged to speak, but maybe use it in the chat if you don't want to say it out loud. Are you getting a better sense that one is more satisfactory than the other? Are you feeling like George, you've maybe become a little bit dizzy changing from one position to the other? And if anybody else wants to contribute their thoughts on this at the moment, it's just you and me, George, I think.
I'd like to contribute.
Hi, Brenda. Please, Brenda, please.
Yeah, I think Project B, because we have to also look at impact on the part of the beneficiary or the people that are getting helped by this project, would definitely be more appealing for them, because having a secure number of hours in a day offers some form of better job security. You can plan, you can organize yourself. These ones, yes, you're paid $10 above the wage threshold, but you don't know how many hours you may not get to work for the month or for the week. So for many people, I feel like Project B would be offering better value to the beneficiaries, and definitely I would go to Project B. Although initially I was at A because of the high number of people employed, but with this information.
Thank you ever so much, Brenda. Again, you know, just that honesty to say my decision was A. In this case, it's now B. And as you rightly talk about, Brenda, there, what we're saying is we are giving the stakeholder, in this case, the previously unemployed person, a voice. We're allowing them a voice. We're empowering them to give us that information that matters to them. So in this case, you talk about, you know, security seems to be the thing that is valuable to people, not the fact that they have an opportunity to earn more money, but it's perhaps the security that is the valuable piece of the puzzle. But again, if we think about what happens in reality, we may only get information about the number of people in a job and perhaps the salary of that job. We rarely ask questions about how important something is to people. And when we don't know how important it is, it's very, very difficult to compare. because that's what valuation allows us to do. It's this hand gesture. It allows us to compare different activities with a consistent unit of measurement. I'm not saying it's always straightforward. It should never be the only thing that drives the decision. But what it does is it significantly can reduce the risk that the decision we make is perhaps what we would now consider to be the wrong one. Now, here's the final piece of information, the final impact question, which says, well, what is our contribution? So as an accelerator, what did you contribute? Or in this case, as employability, how much did you contribute to the changes? So here we're asking the question, the counterfactual, what would have happened anyway? Now, here again, Project A, twice as many people would have found employment without us. Project B, only 40% in this case of people would have found work without us. Now, without doing it to you, George, imagine if those points were the other way around. I can see you smiling, so I won't be so mean to you, but imagine if that information was the other way around. Again, it might make you or might encourage you to make a different decision. So again, without having the information in front of us, having partial information means we're much more likely to make a wrong decision. So whereas I'm an eternal optimist and I talk about maximizing impact, social impact, the opposite side of the same coin is to reduce or manage risk. And George and Brenda and others, you had a lot of risk when I only gave you that first piece of information. Now, not without its challenges, we can calculate an impact score, the value of the impacts that have been created. Now, the formula is there. We won't go into it in too much detail, but essentially we're saying how many people were affected. In this case, we're talking about only one outcome, a job. We're saying that for Project A, 30 people received gained employment. 40% of them were in work after 1 year. So we're taking the value of this impact at 1 year. We know that there's a weighting and importance of 3 out of 10, and our contribution was only 20%, 0.2. So the impact there, in this case, is 7.2 units of measurement. The other one, Project B, 25.2 units. So again, the purpose of this is not to get too bogged down in the particular numbers, because all of this data is completely fictitious, of course. But it allows us to do what we are doing anyway, because we are always choosing between Project A and Project B. And how do we make those decisions? Well, we might have a piece of information that might not be enough information. This is a complete list of impact questions. Now, of course, we're only looking at one stakeholder group and one outcome. There could be other stakeholders and other outcomes. But by following the same process, the same set of questions for those different stakeholders, we can arrive at, if you like, the total impact, the total value of the impact for Project A and Project B, and make a more informed decision. George, how are you feeling now? What's your choice?
I mean, the higher number definitely looks more attractive. I'm going to go with Project B.
You didn't sound as certain as earlier. Is the number, what is it about the number? I sense a sort of reluctance, perhaps.
No, I mean, I haven't come across this kind of math before, so I'm just trying to look at and just trying to think whether you can quantify it in these actual types of numbers to actually come up with some unit or some coefficient, like you're putting it. But it's definitely interesting to see.
And as I say, these numbers are completely, fictitious, rough and ready. I mean, the calculation is fairly standard. So again, when we talk about impact, we're talking about understanding our contribution in numbers. Now, I pause there. I'm no statistician. I'm not an economist. I'm somebody personally who's rooted in qualitative research. But numbers help us make a better decision. But they are not the only thing that drive the decision. Numbers without the context, without the narrative, are meaningless. But another question I want to ask us is, are we going to completely, is Project B perfect? Are there any ways to improve Project B? Oh yeah, George, you switch your camera off. It's absolutely somebody else's turn. Anybody want to anybody want to look at these different? Are we completely abandoning Project A? It's no good. Are we saying Project B is perfect? Are there any other insights from this evidence we have in front of us? Be nice to George, because you know I'm going to turn to him otherwise.
I mean, I'll jump in and maybe let someone else respond next. But I mean, I would be curious to see, for example, if we changed the rate above living wage for Project A. I know it's not an ideal scenario, but if we, for example, change it to $1,000 an hour, just as an example, whether that would then change the quantifying impact, because then it means if one person then got a job in, if the 30 people each got an hour of work, then that really changes the equation. So I'm also just trying to work out the numbers in my head to see whether Project A would still have any merit to be considered as the better project.
Now, Project A, now the income, the salary, the hourly rate does not affect the calculation itself, because whether you're earning $5, $10, or $1,000 an hour over a living wage threshold, or whatever the salary may be, it still depends on how, in case your situation, George, I would ask you how important the job is to you. If it was Naomi, I would ask Naomi. If it was Rosemary, I would ask Rosemary, or a sample of stakeholders. Now, you might get that job paying $1,000 an hour over living wage, but still not value the job, because maybe what you would value is the security. So the value may remain at 3 out of 10. But what I do like, George, is you're looking at this and going, well, how could we improve it? Because if we improve the hourly wage, maybe that would be more valuable to people. Linda, do you mind me turning to you again?
No problem. I was actually hey, can you hear me?
Absolutely, perfectly.
Yeah, so I was just thinking perhaps one of the things that Project A could change would be around targeting. Perhaps to target people who are less likely to get employment. That might improve the outcomes. And then definitely try to see, even if it means reducing the amount of pay above the threshold, but putting in some hours of secured working hours per week. Like, people know I would definitely get this amount. If I was an evaluator, those are some of the things I would recommend, like guarantee some hours. You might even change a little bit the amount you pay above that, and then perhaps change the targeting to attract people who are less likely to get a job.
Amazing. Again, it's not just that we are comparing A to B, we're comparing A with what Project A could be. So almost like A1 versus A2. And as Brenda's rightly said there, I mean, if we look at how many people would have found work without us, 8 out of 10 people. Now, that to me sounds like we need to target different people, as you rightly say, Brenda. We are spending time and resource to support people who don't really need it. Or alternatively, we could support other people who do need that support more. So that would naturally, if imagine you got that from 80% down to whatever the percentage may be, you would increase your impacts. But as you rightly say as well, it's not just that one piece. There's a security, the nature of the job. So what we are now doing is not just saying A is better or worse than B. What we are saying is both projects could be improved. We could increase the impacts of both projects based on this evidence from stakeholders. Now, Project A, maybe we need to change the nature of the training so that we support people into jobs that are more secure. It may be that they do or do not pay the same amount, but they are more secure. I think there's a sustainability issue as well. But even so, Project B has a higher score. We should, if we had to choose one or the other, probably go for Project B, but we can still improve Project B. It still has low numbers of people going into work. Maybe there's a scaling opportunity as well. So this whole process is doing exactly as you guys have just been doing, going, but based on this, we could do something different. We could change it. Now, to change a program, the precision for the decision, you don't need scientific levels of rigor. You just need evidence that is good enough, that is fit for purpose. So for everybody who played the game, thank you. For those of you brave enough to challenge, play along with me, George, Brenda, thank you so much. It's what makes this exercise comes to life. And what you spoke about again is risk. And this is like the hot topic at the moment, if you like, in impact management, is going, well, what are the risks? And how do we reduce those risks? So the more of those questions we ask to the correct people, i.e. those people affected by decisions, the lower the risk is that we make the wrong decision. We are never, ever going to get perfect evidence. It's not going to be objective. It's not going to be scientific. That's fine. It just needs to be good enough. Because the thing I think we should always remember is that, you know, who experiences risk? If we make the wrong decision, well, it's probably not the decision maker. There may be some accountability, but actually the people who experience the risk are the beneficiaries, are the service users. So we continue to provide a training program that does not provide people with a valuable job, that is not sustainable. We're not doing what is most appropriate for those people. So it's about balancing the risk and the return, making sure we have enough resource to collect good enough data, minimizing risks and looking to maximize impacts along the way. So we want to understand our stakeholders. We've got to respect people. We've got to understand that even within Project A or Project B or Project C, it's probably more effective for one group of people than another. Perhaps one segment of people. Perhaps it's a more effective training program for females rather than males, or females aged X to Y rather than Y to Z. Once again, we unpick who our people are, we really understand our stakeholders, that will give us even more insights where we go, the training program needs to change for this group of people. We need to tailor our program to meet their needs, which are different perhaps to the needs of another group of stakeholders. So some more questions from me, and then we'll open it up to a bit of an open Q&A. And George is not allowed to be the one to answer all of these questions. George, unless nobody else does, then it's over to you, my friend. I'm going to give you some insights. Now, I want you to improve things, just as Brenda, just as George did. I want some suggestions, and please do use the chat. You're allowed to use the chat. So in this instance, what we've found is that people with no support network, so that is, you know, don't have a strong family network, perhaps don't have strong friendship networks, they are the people who really failed to secure employment. So 21 out of 25 people with no support network failed to get a job. Now, it's unfair to say failed to get a job. It did not work for them. They did not get employment. I want some suggestions. How could you improve the program? How could you change it so that the next 12-week cohort, you're providing different service, or you'll change your operations? What could you do differently?
You can also put your suggestions in the chat.
Again, we make these decisions all the time. We might look at our training program and go, well, we know it's not working as well as it could. Let's change things. And again, we had the risk last time that we make the wrong decision. Well, now we've got some information, which again is good enough. It's good enough to support our choices.
Adam Siddiqui said focusing on the relationship gap through mentorship.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So a mentorship program. Now, again, let's think about the information we're more likely to have. We're more likely to have information that goes, the rate of employment is 60% on average, for the whole cohort. What can we do differently? Well, I don't know. But as soon as we unpick it that little bit further and go, it is less effective for this group of stakeholders, and in this case, they happen to have no support network, we can look at opportunities around a mentorship program. Fantastic. So maybe pairing together a person with and a person without a support network, perhaps a previous cohort member as well. A working mentor, absolutely. Thank you. George is now even contributing on chat as well. So looking at alternative support networks as well. So what we're not saying is that as an organization, we need to provide family support. We're going, well, look, we've got limited resource. How can we use it as effectively and as efficiently as possible to maximize people's lives? Well, we could look at a mentorship program of some kind. There would be other choices as well. Excuse me. We could provide support. We could signpost people towards different types of support. We could at least manage people's expectations. And a lot of organizations I've worked with have really done that. And they've said, well, look, you are probably going to find this difficult. So, just from the very beginning, managing people's expectations. What about my final choice? My choice is to exclude people from our program who have no support network. How do you feel about that? Towards the end of a conference, trying to be provocative. Any response? You're allowed to say you hate me right now.
Brenda said no good, not good.
Well, Brenda, you're right. It doesn't sound good. But if we think about it, what happens to people who do not succeed? If you try to get a job and it does not work for you, and it's no fault of your own, you're likely to feel worse than you did to begin with. So I think it's true to say for everybody who gets the better job and is satisfied, others may not, and others are likely to therefore feel depressed. So now we have this unintended negative outcome for people. So is it right? Is it morally acceptable to say to people, come onto my program, but there's an 84% chance you'll become depressed? I do like the comments that are coming in, though. We need to dig deeper to find out what support network would be effective. And I agree completely. I think the reality is we should change and change and change, always being looking for innovation, always being looking for ways to support people. But, and it's a last resort, but if we are unable to, is it fair to say to people, come onto this program, but we know there's a very good chance you will feel worse? I only raise it as a last contingency, not as the first thing to do. I absolutely do not encourage bias or working with what, essentially the low-hanging fruit. It is not about making the decisions where it's working with people who are easier, let's say, those closer to the job market in this case. But it is about, as you're rightly saying, how can we change our program? How can we improve people's life opportunities? So I think you're right, we should dig a bit deeper. Now I have some more information, and I'm going to hide behind Mallory and say Mallory made me do this one. Similar data. Mallory didn't make me do this one. I kept it till the last one. So now it's not about people with a support network. It's about people who are female. So a low percentage of females actually completed the training program. And it's not just females, it's females with children. How should we change the program? Because it's not working for this segment of people. I like the points that are coming in. Sarah, you've asked I don't know if it was for this example or the previous one, about looking into benefits they could get and the alternatives. So again, signposting. It's not about saying, don't come on this program, go away. It's about saying, this is not the right one, but this one could be. And maybe there's an opportunity for us to innovate and open a completely new program. So again, I'm definitely not advocating that we exclude people. We look for opportunities to improve things. Adapt the training course to accommodate competing responsibilities. I like that. And I think a couple of people have literally said the same thing. Adapt the program to suit people's requirements. So in this case, their requirements could be just altering the timing. Perhaps it's about children going to school. How many training programs do we start at 9 a.m. and people are late because they've got childcare responsibilities? Let's change the time we start a training program. How much, by the way, how much would that change cost us? Nothing. They're my favorite changes. So again, another point is to say, when we're saying change the program, it doesn't mean necessarily spending any more money. How much rigor, how much accuracy do we need to support that decision? Probably not a lot. It's worth experimenting, starting at 10 a.m. rather than 9 a.m. or whatever it may be, being flexible. So altering the course timings, providing services. Perhaps there's an opportunity for a creche or kindergarten to be started. Who knows? And of course, the option is there to say, this is not the right program. However, as Sarah rightly says, this one is. It's not about excluding, it's about signposting to a more effective opportunity for people. But look, at the end of the day, if we are not able to support people, I know it feels wrong to say, this is cognitive dissonance in action, isn't it? I've got 27 people on this training, on this call, who are all good people, who all want to change the world and change people's lives for the positive. It's really hard sometimes for us to hear that we are not, that we are unintentionally creating negative outcomes, negative effects in people's lives. So it's really hard for us sometimes to accept that. But sometimes we ultimately have to, and change what we're doing, make it better, make sure we're working and respecting to people and their needs. So they're my only challenges, my data insights. But again, to remind us, we've got some data. So data, and more data. Well, as much data as you need, but no more. Make sure that it is good enough. It provides enough precision for the decision, and make sure it is used. The ultimate purpose of impact measurement is impact management. We can all collect data. We all have an impact, but we can all make more impact. So involve your stakeholders. Understand what changes for those stakeholders and others, those ripple effects. Allow the stakeholder to tell us how important those changes are, understand our contribution to those changes, and do something with it. Do something with the evidence to improve things, get this insight, make some choices. Thank you so much for playing the game, for allowing us to be a little bit provocative at times and definitely coping with some tech challenges at the beginning. This is an opportunity. We've got some time if there are any questions. There can be questions certainly about, how we get some of that data, how it can help us drive decisions, some of the challenges and perhaps solutions that people have in the room. And certainly I know Mallory is going to finish by talking about the training sessions that we do have. But if you have any questions about those and the work that ANDE is doing, of course, we will be more than happy to answer those now as well. Just glancing at the clock, we've got plenty of time. This is where I hope there are some questions.
Yeah, and you guys can feel free to put them in the chat and I can read them out, or take yourselves off mute and ask Adam directly. I wonder if you could talk maybe a little bit about like how qualitative data could play a role in helping add more nuance to the decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I'm a big advocate of getting quantitative data, but it has to come initially from qualitative. It's not my job to go and tell a project about its impacts. It's my job, if you like, to go and ask the stakeholders about the impacts of a project. So again, as I've said a number of times, it's about respecting people's voice. It's about respecting people's experiences. But nevertheless, we drill some of it into numbers. But the words have to come out as well. So if we're producing an impact report, there will be a narrative that accompanies it. There will be case studies so that we can understand behind Project A, who are the people we're talking about? You know, there's an organization, and I steal their phrase, but you know, behind every data point is a person. So when we talk about 40% or 70% of people in jobs, well, I want to hear about them. I want to see the case study on Brenda, on Janet, on whoever it may be, because that adds that context as well. And it might be that that again helps make a decision. And it might be that somebody says, well, actually, you know, I want to help this segment of people. Perhaps one of the projects is less impactful, but perhaps it's, for example, supporting female entrepreneurship. Well, okay, the impact might not be as great as a non-female entrepreneurship program, but the accelerator may be more focused on that option rather than the other. So again, that qualitative is absolutely crucial to helping make those decisions as well. It's about being accountable, and it's about shifting power. These are when you give me a moment, when there's a pause, then you know, we start to really talk about what it is, and it's about power. It's about shifting power from decision makers who are powerful to people who are affected by decisions who have less power. Be they the female entrepreneurs, be they the people without support networks, or the young mothers with children. These are the people who we need to empower. We need to, if we want to have more sustained impact and greater impacts, then the information has to come from those people who are affected. So we're shifting power, and that's what gets me very excited. And it's about decision makers becoming more accountable for their decisions, so that we can no longer say 30 people in a job is better than 10 people in a job. It's about how valuable those jobs are to people and how sustainable they are for people. It's not about me making a judgment as to whether one is better or worse than the other. It's about being informed by that evidence. George, my last chance. Sorry, Mallory.
Siddiqui asked to clarify what you meant when you said just enough data. How do you define that?
That's a great question. Yeah, don't let me off if I say things like that. Just enough. It means making sure, you know, it's good enough to support the decision. And what I mean is, you know, if that data about project A versus B is good enough, then that's enough. It's not about saying, no, go and make it more rigorous, go and make it more academically precise or scientifically rigorous. If a small sample size gives you enough confidence to use that data, then it's good enough. Again, it's you know, I use that cheesy phrase, enough precision for the decision. But what we're saying is enough confidence to make the choice, low enough risk that we're confident enough that we are making a good decision. It's never going to be a perfect one. So that's a really great question. Siddiqui, thank you so much for that. No worse than it needs to be, but let's not spend resources getting data that is not helping us make better decisions.
We had another question about how you determine baseline.
Yeah, so we need a baseline. You know, we absolutely need a baseline wherever possible. So I took one at the very beginning. I asked you how confident you were in impact management. What I should have done is asked you at the very end how confident you are. Now, of course, you may feel more confident or less confident. I could have had a positive or possibly even a negative effect on your confidence. But the first thing to say is, before we get a baseline, we need to know what we want to measure. And what we want to measure, what we need to measure, are the outcomes that are experienced by our stakeholders. So there is a risk here's that word again, that we make an assumption about what we need to measure. So often people ask me, the first question they'll say is, which indicator should I use to get a baseline? And my question back is always, what outcome do you need to measure? Which are your stakeholders telling you they are experiencing? Then go and measure it, and then follow it up. So you get your baseline and you follow it up, but you don't just wait till the end of a project. This is where we start to be responsive, and we ask perhaps every quarter, every month, every 6 months, whatever it may be. So we get evidence that is timely. We get evidence, information frequently enough so we can look at it and go, people are not making the progress they need, or we're not doing well enough. What can we do differently to make those improvements? Because too often impact management measurement is seen as the project has ended. How well did we do? What we should be saying is we're starting a project. What are our targets? What are our expectations? Let's monitor and evaluate ongoing and respond to the data whenever we get it. Because that's why we do financial accounting. We don't wait 12 months to find out we are bankrupt. We get evidence every month, every quarter, and we go, we need to improve things, or we're doing really well. Can we do more of it? So financial accounting, we steal all of the good ideas for social impact management, and it's about using evidence to make decisions and make improvements, as I've said at least 35 times in this session. And I make no apologies for it.
Thanks. So this is a good question and probably a good transition. This is from Allison talking about the bigger training. Does your training provide a framework for better quantifying the qualitative impact indicators? For example, a logic model that allows you to articulate your impact in terms of, sorry, another question came in.
No, that I can answer that one very quickly.
You see it?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Not a logic model. It's a bit more expansive than that. So a logic model is very much a case of going, this is what we want to do and this is how we get there. And we have a very thin picture of what we're doing. And it's always just the positive. The training is based on the principles of social value. So 7 principles, stakeholder involvement is central. And we create a not backwards looking, but a forwards looking theory of change, where we understand what changes for stakeholders. There is an Excel spreadsheet called the value map that we provide. You can input all of the data. You can identify those outcomes that are most important to people and then focus your practice on managing those. So principles of social value, the impact questions, and yes, we absolutely have the sort of the tools to go along with it as well.
Great. So we have I think 4 minutes left. Could we go to the slide where we're talking and giving some info about the training? So if you guys really liked this session, we, as part of a project funded by GIZ, the German International Development Organization, we are offering a pretty comprehensive impact management and measurement workshop series specifically created for accelerators. And this is for accelerators who maybe already have an impact framework in place and want to build on it, or people who are just starting from scratch. And we're going to focus on really hands-on activities to actually build your capacity for IMM, and then also engendering an impact culture in your overall organization. So we encourage people to attend this who are not only just specifically focused on IMM or monitoring and evaluation, but also project managers and executives as well. I put the event details in the chat, and you can find more information on ANDE's website. But we are accepting applications until April 1st. And you can get more info in the chat, or you can contact me directly at Mallory St. Clair at aspeninstitute.org, also in the chat. And this is free of charge. So yeah, just a quick plug. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or more information.
Sorry, I was just frantically responding to some chat questions there as well. please do reach out. There's questions there around, do you have examples of quantified impact? And yeah, we've got a database of reports and things I can point people to. And reach out on LinkedIn, and you've got Mallory's email. I'm more than happy to be contacted as well. It is a growing area, but there is a lot of momentum behind this. These ideas, it's a movement whose time has come. Finally, these ideas are going mainstream. What we do not provide is a one-size-fits-all, and it never should be, because your stakeholders are different to mine, different to Mallory's, George's, Edna's, and so on. But what we can provide is a framework and the tools that go with it. But the framework is the thing that is important. Those impact questions, those principles that really do provide that grounding, that give us a consistency, but a flexible, I know it sounds paradoxical, but consistent but flexible approach, so that all enterprises, all accelerators, all investors can manage their impacts in an effective way. I hope to see people on the training. Andy do some absolutely amazing stuff. I just want to say thank you once again to my friends and colleagues at ANDE, to the organisers at Sankalp, to everybody who's participated in this workshop. I've gone from feeling terrified at the very beginning with technology to a big smile on my face now. So once again, everybody, thank you ever so much. Really, really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference, the rest of your week. And when you get there, have a really lovely weekend.